Thank you. Whereas, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this. Mr. Speaker, this bill has actually come here. This is the third time and has lapsed. But it's an extremely important bill. So, Speaker, the objective of this bill is to regulate assisted reproductive technology. Now, what that basically means is to assist couples or people who desire to have children and are not able to assist people with infertility. Basically, what it means, that technology assists the eggs or the ovum from the lady and the sperm from the man to come together. Fertilization takes place, an embryo is formed, and this embryo gets itself into a womb that is biologically ready to grow it into a baby. Basically, that's the problem. Normally, this would happen, that is the issue. Normally, this would happen naturally, but it may fail either because the sperms are not there in the man, or they are there and they are not functional, or the eggs are not there in the woman, or if they are there, the system that brings them together fails, or the womb itself is not ready, or in some circumstances, after surgery, the womb has been removed, but the lady would still want to have a child. That technology is what we actually are talking about. Infertility is a very serious problem. It affects couples, it affects even people who are single, who would like to have children as single parents. And many times in our societies, it has actually affected women more adversely than men, because in couples, when fertility is a problem, when reproduction fails, often the woman is blamed. In almost all languages, there are very derogatory words for that, and therefore the women suffer. And in men, when it also happens, it has its problems. And there are large numbers of people and couples that are affected, and therefore they need this service as a medical service. As Mr. Speaker, what is happening now? It is actually going on in this country, and sometimes people have to travel outside the country to get the services. But the problem is, as that is happening, there is actually no regulation. And yet, this technology has a lot of issues with it. If you talk of the medical issues, the harvesting of embryos from women, particularly young girls, who offer to the harvesting of ova, particularly from young girls who offer to give the eggs. It's a surgical procedure. They have to go through it. There are legal issues that are involved with it. The sperms that are given, often they are sperm banks, but sometimes there are specific offers. There have to be laws that regulate that. And when you have these sperms form embryos, this embryo becomes available. It can actually be used to produce babies, or it can actually go into research. And some of this will bring a lot of ethical issues. And even when it is used, it brings issues of multiple pregnancy or multiple embryos that are produced at the same time. And as Honorable Shakila said, this can go on to produce multiple pregnancies. And sometimes there is even need to reduce this. And what is the ethical situation where you're actually killing a living embryo? That's an ethical issue, or even a legal issue together, going to the Constitution in the definition of when life begins. So these are issues that we have to look at. There are issues like the sex selection. At the time that you have the embryos, people can choose which embryo they let grow, which sex they want. Would it be right if now you choose, I want this sex, and therefore I'm going to destroy this embryo? Now, those are issues that will come. Mr. Speaker, there are issues of using surrogate mothers where actually wombs can be hired so that the mother, the person who carries the baby to term is actually not the mother who had the ovum. And so this is hired either by a couple. When that happens, it then brings the issue of parenthood. Who is the mother? And what are the legal implications? How do you agree? And Mr. Speaker, these embryos can even be stored for use into the future. Now, what are the laws that will regulate that? And who will store it? When people are sick, young people are sick and they may die, they may say, I want to store my sperms, or I want to store my eggs, or an embryo is produced and is stored for future use. Now, how will this be controlled? This can even come into a business. And if it becomes a business, who is selling what? How are you getting into surrogacy?
You need more time? We will, because you are a medic. How long do you need to explain this to us better? I'll give you 2 minutes, Dr. Nyikal.
So the future use, if there is business in this. And what about research? People can start to manipulate genes because these embryos are, I mean, it would be as ridiculous as even trying to use embryos from different animals, and it makes it, these are possible. So that has to be regulated. So, Mr. Speaker, there are all these issues that are necessary, even the health of the people that are involved. It is therefore necessary, Mr. Speaker, that we have a law that regulates this. And to that extent, I support this bill. It creates a directorate. It creates the licensing of who will use it. It creates how you can manage the sperm banks. It creates for how long you can keep the embryos. It creates what kinds of agreements people have to go in if you are going to have surrogacy involved. Or even when parenthood is involved, later on the child may want to know their real parents. What are the legal implications of that? And what are the legal implications in terms of inheritance? So, Mr. Speaker, this is a health service, but it has so much social implications that it needs proper regulation. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I support this bill, and I ask all my colleagues, we support it and make it an act to guide what is already happening now, but happening illegally, and we do not know the extent of the illegal activities that are going on because we have no law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Nikal, just before you sit, how do you deal with the matter of parental responsibility in that context, or in the context of surrogacy?
Well, our law, in the case of surrogacy, if there is surrogacy, what I think is proposed in this bill, and that will follow, is that there's an agreement that once you have given the child up after the surrogacy, then you actually know parental responsibility. But there's an issue of, say, a young man who donated a sperm and later on he finds themselves a parent. What is the right of the child? Our constitution says that there is parental responsibility whether the people are married or not. So what happens when, as a young person, you are just donating a sperm, 30 years later, this person says, you are my father. What are your parental responsibilities? I want a piece of land because you are my father. And the DNA is here to prove this. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving a little more time. But this is an interesting thing. Let us support the bill.
Is the MP for Mwaya and Defender of Teachers is recognized. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And thank you, Honorable Nyikal,